Hello and happy Halloween. And I would say belated because it's November 1st. But actually it's not late. And you'll soon find out why. Halloween isn't over. And I got some reading to do to you. Or for you. Do to you. I can't believe I said that. I got some reading to do to you. Alright. As soon as I get all these candles lit. Well, I'll read one thing here real quick. A commenter recently, that's actually less than 24 hours ago, on one of my channels, Susan's Piano Studio. Susan's Piano Studio. That's the name of her YouTube station, channel, whatever name. She wrote to me, random question, but it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on Christians and Halloween. I live around a lot of people who won't participate in it. Thanks. Again, Susan's Piano Studio said, random question, but it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on Christians and Halloween. I live around a lot of people who won't participate in it. Thanks. And yeah, I've got opinions on it, guessing from my channel, all the paranormal stuff and mixed in with the Christian stuff and spiritual stuff. You might think I'm dead set against Halloween, celebrating it, and I'm not really. I don't, because my kids are all long grown up. And I wish my grandkids were around. I have nothing against children having a good time in a safe, wholesome way. And dressing up and having fun in costumes and going out with their parents is good, in my opinion. Now, that said, it's kind of changed a lot, and I can see the Christian side where some people say, I won't participate in a pagan holiday. And I can see that side of things as well. I'm actually, even though I consider myself a fundamental Christian, first off, I'm actually honored that somebody would even think to ask me such a question and such a request, because I'm nobody other than God and a few people, Who am I? I'm honored. So, okay, I will give you my take on it, my thoughts on it. And I will get around to what I was saying about what Halloween has become and my thoughts on that. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to do some reading, because there's 3 places with Halloween. This is something that's in our society. And it used to be, it just came from Ireland primarily, and Wales, Scotland, and Northern England. It was a Celtic thing, and I've got a lot of roots in that area. So, for that reason, no tea tonight. I'm going to have a wee taste of the good stuff. And I do say a wee taste because I'm trying to lose weight. So, Halloween, three ways to look at it. Where it came from is very important. Where it is today and where it appears to be headed. I think they're all, it's a good way to get a good look at this, and then I will give you my opinions on it. So, without further ado, I'm going to read this. I got off the BBC, has a website, British Broadcasting Channel. BBC, you're familiar with it, I'm sure. And I'm going to read what they wrote up on the history of Halloween, going right up in today's pagan and Wiccan stuff. Okay, so I learned how to say a few Gaelic words, like Halloween originally was called Samhain, and that's spelled Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. Samhain is a pagan religious festival originating from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. In modern times, Samhain, a Gaelic word pronounced Samhain, That's where I learned it. It told me how to say it. Then I looked it up. Say sow like cow. Samhain. With the accent on the first syllable. So Samhain. Samhain is usually celebrated around October 31st to November 1st. So it starts on October 31st and goes through to November 1st. And actually it went on for longer than that. So I'm not really late. It's November 1st, time of this reading. Usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Celebrants believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down during Samhain. Samhain. I guess I'm saying it right. Allowing more interactions between humans and the denizens of the other world. And this writing is from BBC's, I got it off the BBC, their webpage. It's not my words, but I have read this a couple times. Ancient Samhain. Ancient Celts marked Samhain as the most significant of the 4 quarterly fire festivals, taking place at the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. It took place somewhere in the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. During this time of year, hearth fires in family homes were left to burn out while the harvest was gathered. After the harvest work was complete, celebrants joined with Druid priests to light a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. That sounds kind of interesting, doesn't it? Imagine that. All these people gathered around some Druid priest with a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. That's probably pretty cool. The wheel was considered a representation of the sun and used along with prayers. Cattle were sacrificed and participants took a flame from the communal bonfire back to their home to relight their hearth. So they let their hearth burn out. They finished their harvest for the season. Then they all got together and these Druid priests would take some kind of a wheel, I don't know if it was metal or rock, and it made friction and caused sparks. And the sparks would cause a fire. And they'd build a fire and then they'd take some of that fire and go home and they'd light their hearth with it. Early texts present Samhain as a mandatory celebration lasting 3 days and 3 nights. So I'm into day 1 of Samhain, but I don't practice it. But you know, they were Celts. This is before Christianity. They had spiritual beliefs. It's just part of being a human society. You know, there aren't too many ancient human societies that were what you would call atheists that I know of from reading history. And I've been reading it for my whole life. And a lot of these people were my ancestors too, so, you know, roots. Early texts present Samhain as a mandatory celebration lasting 3 days and 3 nights where the community was required to show themselves to local kings and chieftains. Failure to participate was believed to result in punishment from the gods, usually illness or death. There was also a military aspect to Samhain in Ireland, with holiday thrones prepared for commanders and soldiers. Anyone who committed a crime or used their weapons during the celebration faced a death sentence. To no violence. Some documents mention 6 days of drinking alcohol to excess, typically mead or beer, along with gluttonous feast. So they all partied, and you weren't allowed to use your swords or any weapons. They kept it cool while they celebrated Samhain. Samhain monsters. Because the Celts believed that the barrier between worlds was breachable during Samhain, they prepared offerings that were left outside villages and fields for fairies or SIDHS. I don't know how to pronounce that. SIDHS. SIDHS. I don't speak Gaelic, sorry. Yeah, I do a little bit. A little bit. Dis Moragut. I think that's how you doing in Gaelic. Somebody taught me that. I probably just said something really filthy and I don't even know it. This guy I used to work with, Patrick, was from Cork, Ireland. He spoke Gaelic. He'd only teach me that. Tell me how you say, how's it going, Patrick? Okay, team, it's a Dis Moragut. I still remember that, but he was kind of, he might have taught me something really bad for all I know. It was expected that ancestors might cross over. It was expected that ancestors might cross over during this time as well. And Celts would dress as animals and monsters so that fairies were not tempted to kidnap them. Hence comes in the costumes. That they thought during this time the spiritual veil was thin with their participation in Samhain, and they thought maybe their ancestors would want to come cross over to check up on them, but they didn't want them to be in danger from evil spirits, basically. Well, that's what I'm getting from it. Some specific monsters were associated with the mythology surrounding Samhain, including a shape-shifting creature called a puka, P-U-K-A-H, that receives harvest offerings from the field. The Lady Gwyn, as a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and was accompanied by a black dog. The black dog thing goes out, it's got a long history throughout the British Isles up to this very day. And that's in one of my videos, actually, on when I talk about my encounters with what they call Bigfoot or whatever, or black-eyed creatures, black creatures with red glowing eyes. It goes back, and they're real. I'm certain they're real. Lady Gwyn, oh, I'm sorry, black pig. Yeah, it's a black pig, usually a dog or a pig, sometimes a horse. The Lady Gwyn is a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and was accompanied by a black pig. A black pig. That does sound frightening. Sounds evil. The Dullahand sometimes appeared as impish creatures. Dullahan, D-U-L-L-A-H-A-N. And some of my few watchers in Ireland might be getting a laugh out of my pronunciations here. I'm going to read on and get through this. The Dullahan sometimes appeared as impish creatures, sometimes headless men on horses who carried their heads, riding flame-eyed horses, like I said, red-eyed horses, flame-eyed horses. Their appearance was a death omen to anyone who encountered them. A group of hunters known as the Fairy Host might also hunt Samhain and kidnap people. Similar are the, I can't pronounce it, S-L-U-A-G-H, the Slough, who would come from the west to enter houses and steal souls. And in the Middle Ages, see, that's the Dark Ages in ancient times. Then in the Middle Ages, we'd say, 10 or 1200 BC, something like that, up to about, I think Middle Ages are considered to go up to about the year 1500 in Britain, and then we start getting called modern, or early modern time, Middle Ages. As the Middle Ages progressed, so did the celebrations of the fire festivals. Bonfires known as Samhainigans, which were more personal Samhain fires nearer to the farms, became a tradition, purportedly to protect families from fairies and witches, or evil spirits. I mean, they believed in these, they didn't see them as, like we see witches in Halloween. They saw them as evil spirits from the other world, never human type. Carved turnips called jack-o'-lanterns began to appear, attached by strings to sticks and embedded with coal. Later, Irish tradition switched to pumpkins. Good idea. In Wales, men tossed burning wood at each other in a violent game and set off fireworks, tossed burning wood at each other in a violent game. Were they drinking? Do you think? My ancestors. In northern England, men paraded around with noisemakers. That would be me with my accordion. Dumb supper, D-U-M-B, dumb supper. I think they maybe mean dumb where you don't speak. I don't know. The tradition of dumb supper began during this time as well, in which food was consumed by celebrants, but only after inviting their ancestors to join in, giving the families a chance to interact with spirits until they had left following dinner. I wonder if it ever actually happened. I bet it did. I bet it did, or wouldn't have, the tradition never would have taken on. Children would play games to entertain the dead, while adults would update the dead on the past year's news. That night, doors and windows might be left open for the dead to come in and eat cakes that had been left for them. Christian Samhain. As Christianity gained a foothold in pagan communities, church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain as a Christian celebration. The first attempt was by Pope Boniface in the 5th century. That's before the Middle Ages. He moved the celebration to May 13th, way out of the fall, and specified it as a day celebrating saints and martyrs. The fire festivals of October and November, however, did not end with this decree. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory, 400 years later, Pope Gregory moved the celebrations back to the time of the fire festivals, but declared it All Saints' Day on November 1st. All Souls' Day would follow November 2nd. So All Saints' Day in the 9th century, it was made All Saints' Day on November 1st. That would be today. All Souls' Day would be November 2nd. Samhain merges with Halloween. Neither new holiday did away with the pagan aspects of the celebration. On October 31st became known as All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, and contained much of the traditional pagan practices before being adopted into 19th century America through Irish immigrants bringing their traditions across the ocean. Trick-or-treating is said to have been derived from ancient Irish and Scottish practices in the nights leading up to Samhain. In Ireland, mumming was the practice of putting on costumes, going door to door, and singing songs to the dead. Cakes were given as payment. So they got a little handout. They went dressed up and they sang songs to the dead, knock on your door, and I wonder what they sung. They sang songs to the dead and were given cakes, I guess pastries, cookies, whatever, I don't know, as handouts. Payment. Payment. Halloween pranks also have a tradition in Samhain. Though the ancient celebration, tricks were typically blamed on fairies. All right, so then we get into Wicca and Samhain. A broad revival of Samhain, resembling its traditional pagan form, began in the 1980s with the growing popularity of Wicca. Wicca celebration of Samhain takes on many forms, from the traditional fire ceremonies to celebrations that embrace many aspects of modern Halloween, as well as activities related to honoring nature or ancestors. Wiccans look at Samhain as the passing of the year and incorporate common Wiccan traditions into the celebration. In the Druid tradition, Samhain celebrates the dead with a festival on October 31st. In the Druid tradition, Samhain celebrates the dead with a festival on October 31st and usually features a bonfire and communion with the dead. American pagans often hold music and dance celebrations called Witches' Balls in Proximity to Samhain. That's all I have. A bunch of blank pages. Whew, I was thinking, man, how much more of this I got? So there's pretty much the history of Halloween, going all the way back to its early roots. And I don't think it's evil. I don't. So that's where it came from. Where is it today? Guess that depends where you live. Some people, I can understand Christians saying I'm not going to participate in a pagan, whatever you want to call that, practice. And it definitely is pagan. Definitely. That's where it came from. But, we did trick-or-treating it's been around for a while. When I was a kid in the 60s, and my brothers and I really enjoyed it. My mom enjoyed it, dressing us up and all that, and it was a good time, They had creeps back then. They had people doing dumb things with candy. Bad people aren't anything new, believe it or not. People doing awful things on Halloween is not new. I can tell you that, being an old guy that had been around for a while. I can tell you, in this little town last night, I spent like $35 on candy and I ran out. And I said, that's it. I just put it out there in a bucket with a red disc by it. And really, I didn't entertain it. I used to answer the door and I'd have a costume on sometimes, and really just love to see the young people with their children. And that's all it was last night. It was just families walking around with their children, dressed up. Just like when I was a kid. Really, I live in a small town. This town is actually a really nice little town, I think. It's got its problems. But it rained. It had it was kind of just a drizzle, probably maybe 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And it wasn't really that bad out. And I went out, walked the dog for a while, just walking around. And I met a few people I know, and we talked, and, told some of the kids, wow, I really like your costumes. Some of their costumes were really great. But I didn't see anything bad going on. I didn't see any parties or anything, drinking going on. It's just family. It was family time in my town. Elsewhere, what gets me? It started out in Celtic Britain, came to America, and of course, it's a holiday made for commercial reasons. A lot of money to be made off Halloween. I spent $35 on candy last night, and it wasn't enough. My neighbor 3 doors down said they spent $100 on candy. And the costumes and everything to go with it. So it's big money like Valentine's Day, and the old meaning of it is lost. As a Christian, I don't know, would I call myself a devout Christian? I try to be. I'm not a perfect Christian. As a Christian, I don't have a problem with it. I don't know if Jesus, I don't think Jesus would. I might be wrong, but Jesus loved to see families together. Jesus loved to see children having a good time. I don't think it makes you a pagan, to enjoy Halloween. And as for Wiccans and people that try to take up the old practice of it, I know a few Wiccans, and I don't have a problem with it. Believe it or not, I guess it's the American in me. But I really believe in freedom of religion. You can believe whatever you want. You want to be whatever you want, so long as you're not hurting anyone else with it or leading people down the wrong path. I don't believe in the devil worship, honestly. I think that just goes bad places. And so, no, I guess not. I'm not good with everything. Though I had a couple of acquaintances that were into that had a black Bible, black arts, devil worship. I don't even like to talk about it. But I was on friendly terms with these people, but I wouldn't call them my friends. Just they didn't accept that I was a Christian. I accepted they had a right to do whatever they want, but I really questioned what they were doing personally. And I've known Wiccans that do practice Gawain, and they have a witch's ball, and they do things for nature, and sometimes they go to a cemetery, which I think is sacrilegious. I really don't think people should be playing around in cemeteries other than burying people and going there to commemorate their dead that are buried there, whatever, you know. But if they're not hurting anything or defacing anything, you know, believe whatever you want. I have told people that I care about who are practicing Wiccans that I think what they're doing is dangerous. They shouldn't entertain any spirits. They don't know what they're dealing with. And you know what? These people were all very receptive to me. In fact, they more or less agreed with me. And I said, you need to take this serious. You know, you're out there with candles, dressed up in a cemetery, doing things, pagan things. I said, you could attract something really negative. And it doesn't give a darn about your beliefs or your costumes or your candles. It's going to follow you home and might make a mess of your life or your children's lives. So you better be careful. And you know, I told a few Wiccans this, and they were actually very receptive to that. They did agree. I can think of 3 people right now, and 2 of them totally agreed with me. And one was kind of, yeah, you're right, but, you know. So that's where it's at today. I think, I don't have a problem with children having fun. My brothers and I, we all did Halloween growing up, right up until we were about 13 years old or so. It was a good time, good memories. None of us were doing anything evil, you know, or we were all Christians going to church, and it didn't really seem to conflict with that. So I think that Christians, anything that gets families together and their children together, having good, wholesome fun, I'm all for it. Unless they start doing things that, as Christians, that directly go in the face of God, personally, I say go for it. Go for it. Be smart, though. You know, you know what I mean? You've got heads. Like I said, God didn't call us to be stupid. So be smart and about it, and look at the things that your children are doing, and make sure none of it is anything that would go against the teachings of Christ. And I don't think much of it does. I saw a lot of little girls dressed up with really good witch costumes that had lights all over it. Kids dressed up like Barney Bear and skeletons. I saw a baby in a baby carriage. Really cool. With these skeleton lights. It looked like a baby skeleton in the carriage. I saw some pretty good costumes last night. Really, they're getting better and better each year, it seems like. So I'm all for it. Where's it going? See, that's what I'm concerned with. Because now Halloween's not just Celtic, where it started. Then lo and behold, it's a holiday made for money, commercialism, with all the money, you know, costumes and candy and TV shows and what have you. It took roots in Asia now. I guess it's a big holiday in other parts of the world. It spread to Europe pretty close to the same time it took on in America, from my understanding. And now it's big in Asia. They had some big tragedy in Korea this year with a stampede at a holiday festival. And I personally think, well, I don't have a problem with adults celebrating it. You know, how many work parties have you gone to, adult work parties? Or just adult parties where you dress up? I remember, God, I used to love these things. They'd have, you know, I hate to say it, I'd go to a bar around here, and they'd have a band, usually Halloween night, a band. And if you dressed up, you got in for free. And there'd be plenty of dancing and, you know, just a good time. And I miss that, to tell you the truth. I really miss that. We used to, here's a picture of, I miss being in the Army because I used to be able to have a free Halloween costume. Here's a picture of me, I think in the late 90s, with my older brother Ray at his Halloween party, which he used to throw some really good ones at his cabin on the lake. So here's that picture of me dressed up like an army man. Imagine that. I think that some of that was actually my Army issue stuff. The shirt was not Army issue. Well, it was actually. it was Army issue for Op 4. If you were playing a bad guy in war games, you wore that shirt so you'd look different. So, yeah, it is all Army issue. So that's me with camo on my face and some leaves in my helmet. Having a good time with my brother on a Halloween party. And I miss all that. I really miss that. I miss it. I miss dressing up. I miss going to the dances. I miss taking my children out. I've got pictures of my children, but it'd take me a day or two to find them. But we used to get dressed up really good, and we'd go out trick-or-treating, and they'd have a good time. And they'd have candy for about 3 weeks, you know? So that's my take on Halloween. I don't celebrate it at all. Picture off. I don't celebrate Halloween at all anymore because I live alone and I'm older. But up until recently, I used to always kind of celebrate it a little bit with, if somebody was in my life, we'd maybe have a party, you know, with some beers and some food and music. Or more likely, honestly, I'd go out to, there used to be a local bar. There's no bars in this town, the Betty Blue. I'd usually go there and there'd be people dressed up really good, men and women. And there'd always be good music, good live music. And we'd have a good time. And I actually played accordion a few times and played guitar, rock guitar, electric guitar. And now that bar is a food pantry. It got closed down and sold during COVID. And I go to, there's another one on the lake that's pretty nice. I just don't do that stuff anymore. If I'd like to do it again, it'd be nice. So, I don't know, that's my take on Halloween and Christianity. Honestly, I understand it's got pagan roots. My ancestors were pagans, your ancestors were pagans at some point. A lot of them, many of them, probably most of them, if you think about it, were pagans. Christianity coming along just the past couple thousand years, and for my ancestors the past 1,500 years or less, and our ancestors go back a lot longer than that. So I don't think they were bad people for what they did. It sounds kind of interesting, tell you the truth, in a kind of a dark way. You know, where they have kids singing songs to the dead. Where they would make dinner for them because they thought, you know, druids making I didn't know that, with a wheel that made sparks. That sounds kind of interesting. I mean, picture that at night, and everybody's gathered in this medieval village center, and it's dark out. There's just some torches lit here and there, and they have some big gathering of people with some druid priest talking in some weird language, turning some wheel that made sparks enough to start fires. And they'd have a big fire, and they'd have a feast and a party. Meanwhile, their hearths are burned out in their homes. Excuse me. What am I saying excuse me for? And then they'd carry some of that back and relight their fires. And then they'd have dinners, and they would, yeah, like everything I read, they'd expect some of their ancestors to stop by. And they must have really believed in this, honestly, up to the point where you could get in big trouble for not participating in it, right? Up to the point is if you used weapons or any acts of violence during this Samhain, you got the death penalty. So you're supposed to keep it cool. And then winter came, and you know, these people they had a lot of fear in their life, and superstition. You'd really have to take a moment and pause and transport yourself back to their world to kind of try to understand where they were coming from. And I actually done a lot of reading on them. The Celts and the Druids. I bought books before the internet. I used to buy books on it. Now there's information all over the place. I don't think I don't have a problem with it as a Christian. What I would have a problem with is people anybody doing anything criminal. I have a problem with that, because I imagine in a lot of places, not this peaceful little community I live in, it can get way out of hand. I mean, if I lived in the city, inner city, I might not celebrate it at all. Or if I did, it would be in a controlled environment, like a church party or something, or a school party. Even then, I would school party, I'd be leery. So I would say not that. Where anybody's doing anything, honestly, Satan worship, I wouldn't support that at all. Here I am with all these candles lit and a Guinness. So yeah, there are definitely some draw the line areas, and as a parent, you have to be very responsible as a Christian parent as well to make sure that your children aren't entering into something that could cross the line. But the stuff I see around here, my little community, all the stuff I grew up with as a child for the most part, and all the stuff I dealt with when my children were little, as a parent, I didn't see anything that really went against Christianity personally. Like I said, I think Jesus was all for children and families. Jesus took a hard line on divorce, a hard line, equally on men and women, that they need to stay together and faithful. And Jesus really loved children. So you know Jesus loved to see families together, doing wholesome things. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm going to be repeating myself even more if I keep going. So we went from Samhain to All Hallows Eves to Halloween. All Saints. Today would be All Saints Day. And tomorrow, November 2nd, would be All Souls Day. Halloween the 31st, the night. Today, All Saints Day, and I haven't looked into what that's all about. And this goes back to the 9th century in Celtic countries. November 2nd would be All Souls Day. So, there you have it. Happy Halloween. And thank you for thinking of me with that comment. And I like to read your comments too. So this is my opinion on things. On it. That's all.